AI agents are everywhere, automating tasks and making decisions at machine speed. But agents make mistakes. Just one rogue agent can do big damage before you even notice. Rubrik Agent Cloud is the only platform that helps you monitor agents, set guardrails, and rewind mistakes, so you can unleash agents, not risk. Accelerate your AI transformation at Rubrik.com. That's RUBRIK.com.
Welcome to this episode of The Inner Estate with your host, Bridget Stuart. I have a very special guest today. She's a wildly successful attorney out of Washington, D.C., Rebecca Kuehn. Becky, thank you for being our guest today.
Thank you for having me.
And we are going to jump into a topic that I'm really excited to talk about. We're going to discuss developing an actual career rather than, say, just having a job. And we're going to talk about that, whether you're starting out and you're young, or even if you're relaunching yourself or changing midlife. We're going to dive into really developing a career you can be proud of and that will help you build that life that you desire. So, Becky, you, as I mentioned, are an attorney now 31 years in your chosen career, and you are with Hudson Cook out of Washington, D.C. You're the chair of their credit reporting, privacy, and data security. And you really, in your tenure as an attorney, you have really had a lot of experience both firsthand with your own path, but also seeing the paths of hundreds, at least, of attorneys as they're venturing and making their way into your industry. Can you tell us, what do you think about when you consider developing a career versus having a job?
I think the first key component is passion. You've got to really love what you do. You spend a lot of time with your career and working. You got to really love it. I see a lot of folks who just sort of come in, do the job, go home, and that translates into a lack of investment in what they do. So find what you like. I mean, where I focus now, which is in this credit reporting privacy space, I didn't get into that until about 97. And honestly, I fell into it.
Okay.
But before that, I'd done a bunch of other stuff and was like, yeah, it's okay. I could definitely, I was good at it, but not great. I was not going to stand out in a crowd. And so I think first you've got, particularly when you're starting out, you might have to try on a couple hats to figure out what is it that excites you, what feeds your passion, what are you intellectually interested in? And so that's, for me, I think the first building block, finding something you really love.
I think that's really critical, and having that passion. It's funny, when you said you fell into it, I just had in my head, it popped in, Wile E. Coyote falling into a black hole that says credit reporting and privacy. So apparently that's an odd thing to just fall into, but definitely piqued my curiosity with that. It also made me think back to when all of us were in school. What you're describing shows up from a young age, because typically people are drawn more to certain subjects than others because, as you said, you have the intellectual curiosity about it and the desire to know more. So if anyone is trying to figure out how to pinpoint that, that's one of the ways. We all had classes where we did whatever we had to do to get an A or whatever grade you were shooting for. But it was a drudgery and it was trying, and you were like, I can't wait till this is over. And then there were others where we just wanted more, and we would actually do more study than required because we were so passionate about it. So I agree that passion is going to allow you to shine as well when you are really doing it.
And then I think the second component is, once you find something you're passionate about, you have that interest, take the time to ask yourself why this is something that interests you. Because, nobody grows up to want to be a credit reporting lawyer. It's not something that folks aspire to. But there's a component of what I do, as opposed to other fields of law, that's very real for people, the everyday person. And that speaks to me. And I think about your career in the real estate area, home ownership, things like that, very real to people. So I like that part of what I do, because sometimes when I need to explain my complicated concepts to somebody, you can make them real very fast because they have such a practical impact on everyday people.
Yes. And what they're able to do, how much it will cost, the opportunities available. You definitely are in a field that has an impact on practically everyone. So what would you look at the flip side of it? So we did talk about what to look for to develop a career. What are the signs of someone who is just having a job in your experience?
Typically, those are folks that come in and they do, if they're good employees or good attorneys, they're going to do what's expected of them. But there isn't that desire to sort of figure out the next step. And so, one of the challenges I've had in trying to grow my team, particularly with more junior lawyers, so not someone who's already found that this is an area that interests them, is to get them to engage on more than just I've got my assignment, I complete my assignment, I turn in my assignment type of relationship. You want them to say, I've did this
Hmm.
assignment, but did we think about X or did we think about Y? Do you think the client should be considering these other issues to be able to grow their business? Here's some road bumps I think, come up. So we need to maybe be thinking about that strategically for them. That kind of initiative, that kind of care really makes a big difference in somebody's success. The people that sort of get in it for making money or just because I needed something out of law school and these people hired me, you can kind of pick up on that
Right. Yeah.
pretty quickly. And as our firm, we are not one of the bill 2,000 hours, never have a home life thing. We work hard, but we also have plenty of time for ourselves, for our families, for vacation, travel, whatever our interests are. You could still tell the people that are just like, I'm going to do the very bare minimum that I need to do everything I can outside of the office. And that's not
Hmm.
sustainable because you spend too much time doing work and, you need to have some kind of passion or interest in the things that you do.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because early parts of our career, especially the 90s, but even into the early 2000s, there was this expectation that if you were going to become successful, then you better plan on working 60, 70, 80 hours a week, and you've got to be the last one to leave and the first one to get there, and the person that never says no, and they cancel family plans to take care of something for the butler. Is that still, because I don't want people to think that's what we're talking about. Do you feel that that is still a thing, or was that a hideous phase that has somewhat subsided?
It depends on where you're working. And that was the other part of what I had to figure out over the years. And we've talked about this. I've done this area of law once I fell into it. I've done it from a litigation standpoint. I've been a government regulator. I've been an in-house lawyer and leading to where I've been now for 10 years. And I think it's finding the right kind of work environment, which is the second component, right? You need to know what it is that makes your passion. But if you're somewhere and you're still not happy doing that, then you've got to look at sort of like, what are the conditions of where you work? Who are the people you're working with? What is the sort of balance? There are some people who love to work 80 hours a week. And so a lot of big law firms, that feeds their passion great, right? So they're working all
Right.
the time and they're making crazy money. And that's exactly it. That's never been me.
Right.
So even when I was working in larger firms, I was never the top hour person by a long shot, but I was still getting
Right.
great results for my clients. And I'm also very
Hmm.
efficient in what I do. So, and I pride efficiency on the folks that work with me. So we like to get good work done in a reasonable amount of time, get our clients the answers they need, but then also be able to do the other things that excite us or to balance, whatever you have going outside of the office. So when I look at that, I think about if people are where they are and they thought they loved this work and they're losing their passion for it, it may not be the work, it may be the where. So they might have to start looking out and figuring out where they want to move to and what kind of aspects of a job. I mean, their in-house was fun, but it had different types of stress, for example. Or government's great. It has different types of stress. So you've got to figure
Right.
out what works best for you.
We have something very similar in my industry in real estate because, as you know, there's so many different paths in real estate. There's commercial, land, ranches, horse, regular residential, uh, investors, so it's funny you mentioned that because I say the same thing. Some people hit 15, 16 years in real estate and they have a great business, but they're losing the fire. And I'm like, is it just because you've sold the same product so long? Why don't you set a challenge? Why don't you break into luxury? Why don't you start selling apartment buildings? Why not get into a niche? And then you can find that you're completely revitalized. Or it could also be the where. You're not
Yeah.
way more so in my industry than yours. Sometimes agents think the where is too important, and they think if they change companies that all of a sudden life's different.
Yeah.
Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. But we have way more hopping around. It's easier to do in my industry than in your industry. But that's great advice. And I think anyone who's listening, either in law or real estate, or frankly, anyone who is in a career where your success is determined by a significant amount of your creativity, input, and passion, I think anyone should consider the things you and I just shared. Is it you said it very
Yeah.
well. You said, is it the where or the what, right?
Yeah. And I think, yes. But I also think, again, it's taking that time to figure it out. When you mention job hopping, it's not limited to the real estate field. It's
I
becoming
know.
much more common in the law. And I think people try on something for a little bit and they're unhappy with whatever progress they made. And my concern is that they're not taking that time, that self-awareness to say, what is it that's causing me to feel like I'm stuck? Is it is it the place that I'm working, or is it some sort of lack of investment on myself? One of the challenges I have is trying to get particularly younger lawyers to be in charge of their career, right? I mentioned about,
Mhm.
people that come just for a job or ticket takers, just doing the assignments. But we see this even in conscientious and interested younger lawyers, right? Or newer entrants into the market, just because they're kind of, they're like, well, I'm just trying to get the work done day to day. But you've got to take that time in the week, every week, to take a step back and say, okay, here's what I did this week. These are the skills I've developed. What am I missing? What is it I need to sort of build out? And how do I go and get that? Even though we have mentors for all of our younger attorneys, the associates, you still have to own your own career from the get-go. And when I joked about falling into my area, part of that was because the other colleagues I had at the time were busy on this, and this new area of litigation popped up. Nobody knew it from Adam because it was brand new. But I said, I'll learn it. I will take this on. This is interesting to me. And then they kept throwing the cases to me because I'm the person who had learned the statute. And the next thing I know, now I've developed an expertise and I have name recognition for being in this area, et cetera. So, figuring out, where you want to go with your career, how to get there, being more thoughtful about it. That's sometimes I see that missing in folks who are kind of adrift and not really getting traction.
Well, it's interesting because two things pop to mind. One is I have heard that in your industry in law that there's actually a bit of a flux, and it's been going on an influx of new attorneys coming out of law school. And you probably know this better than I do, but it's been going on for several years now. And some of them are having surprisingly more difficulty landing where they're going to start, where they're going to build their career, and it's harder for them to come out of school and actually get a position. What has your experience been with that situation?
Well, the benefit of having a lengthy career is you've seen the cycles happen before. So this happened,
Mm-hmm.
I want to say probably in the mid 90s, right, where we saw this sort of downturn and people getting laid off and a lot of shrinking. And we're kind of in that contraction phase right now. But there are jobs out there. And I think a couple things are important. One, figuring out where you might meet people is a big thing. So
Okay.
the bar association and going to bar association meetings, CLEs, taking a course in person. I really think there's no substitute for that when you're networking. I know it sounds very old school. A lot of people flip to Zoom, but that's where you build those connections. And that might be the next person who can tell you about the job opening that hasn't popped up on any of the job boards, et cetera. It also helps you build those skills. So if you're in privacy, for example, there's some privacy certifications. You can be taking those courses, getting that certification. It just puts you ahead of the others who are also looking for that job. And don't be afraid to take what you think is the lesser job. So for some attorneys coming out of school, they want to get the big law job because the big bucks come with the big law job that pays off
Right.
the student loans. I get that, but sometimes the job is better than no job, and you might find that you're making enough, which is, I know, a strange concept for some folks, but you're making enough to be able to pay your bills and have a good life. And you're learning in a different environment where you're going to get your hands, get right down into the work right away. I made a shift after my second year of practice to another firm that was more local. It was less national. So I got there, I got cases to handle on my very own. They had big cases, they had small cases. So they had the kind of things where I could get those skills. And a lot of smaller firms or mid-sized firms have those opportunities. They don't pay what the big firms do, but they definitely have it. I
Right.
used to say there's government right now. That's not as much of an opportunity. The government stuff is pretty dry right now, but there are, opportunities in companies once you get a couple years of experience, if that's something that you're looking to do. So, you know, cast a wider net on what you're looking for. And even if this is like, I definitely know this is not where I want to work. Take it for what it's worth. Like, learn what you
It's
can,
a resume
take that
builder.
passion and
It's
yeah, and grab the
Yeah.
skills. I mean, you're gonna learn things in different jobs. I've learned something everywhere I've worked, that I might not have been able to learn anywhere else, and so I think that's important to focus on too.
Well, it leads me to the second thought that I had. You might be surprised. I don't know if you're aware of this. There's a surprising number of successful realtors that I know personally, and just some data supports it as well, that were attorneys that stopped practicing law and became full-time realtors. By the way, any attorney out there that's thinking about it, very high success rate. These skills that you learn as an attorney translate extremely well into being a successful full-time realtor. But I personally have close colleagues and friends that have done that. I have coached attorneys that became realtors, and offices that I've run. I've had attorneys that became realtors. There are a bunch are popping into my mind right now. So I don't know if you knew that that was a thing, but that's a thing. And it's so funny because sometimes I'll hear from people and they're like, what? Who would ever stop being a lawyer to be, quote unquote, just a realtor? And it's funny because when you look at top 20% in terms of income in both industries, you're all making good money, right? So it is a viable choice to make. What's funny to me is, and I asked you about this a while ago, that I also coach realtors that are, most of them are like late 30s, early 40s. One was early 50s, where they are drawn to law and they come to me to consult about, could they become an attorney? Of course they can, right? I'm always like, it's your life,
Mhm.
build it by design. If you want to, go for it. Get the information right now on what law school would take, figure it out. However, when I think about the state of making that kind of switch, I would love your insight. So if someone came to you, we'll just say 40s, someone in their 40s, they have a successful career in another industry, and they say to you, you know what, I'm thinking about going to law school and becoming an attorney now. What's your, what's the advice you would give? And are you aware of any sort of success rate of people doing that?
Don't know success rates, but I know success
Okay.
stories of folks who've been somewhere else and have decided that, being a lawyer was what they wanted to do. And really think about that, right? Because just getting a law degree, it's too expensive to just do it on a whim. So that's usually one
Hmm.
of the barriers there.
Yeah.
But
Well, that's
but
usually why I tell them to look at
oftentimes,
that first.
yeah, that part is
Yeah.
expensive. I my law school mortgage until I finally got it paid off. Um,
Right.
but the big thing is, particularly for some fields, my partner who does a lot of this work with me was a banker first. And that gave her unique insight. So when she, moved into doing law, she does financial services law, among other things. She has a great insight into that. And she understands the client in a way that other lawyers might not. And so
Right.
it's, thinking about that, particularly if you liked what you're doing, but you want to do something maybe different or more challenging, or you want to add that aspect. Think about the opportunities there are for that. One of the reasons I think that lawyers who become real estate agents and vice versa are so successful is because a lot of the law is relationship building. You got to have the skills,
Yes.
absolutely.
Yes.
But your goal as a lawyer is to help solve your client's problem. Sometimes they're not sure what that problem is, or they think it's this and it turns out
That's
it's
right.
something else. So that's part of the
Yes.
discussion, just as you do in real
Right.
estate, I'm sure, with, some of the clients you guys work with. But if you have those kind of skills, they will carry forward the desire to build business, a sense of how to do that, of how to market, of how to sort of brand yourself. All of those things translate into the practice of law. And I think the people who come into it later and have been most successful is because they've already built those other skills that I think are sometimes harder for lawyers to build from the ground up.
Well, yeah, it's interesting. And when I knew that we were going to talk, I started thinking about that interplay between real estate and attorneys. And it's not just real estate attorneys or attorneys that do wills, trusts, and estates. I mean, obviously, realtors are working with them all the time, but guess what else? Divorce attorneys. In
Hmm.
fact, one of my good, really successful realtor friends in California became a divorce attorney because she was so good at handling the sales of divorcing families, and she became passionate about it. And I haven't checked in, but I think she's loving being a divorce attorney. So that it is interesting, the interplay between the two. It may be two industries that may be very closely aligned more so than some others. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
interesting that people not just hopping firms or hopping brokerages, but also hopping back and forth between the two. The one big difference I'll say between real estate and law, and you mentioned it, the threshold, which by the way, I don't know necessarily, there's some parts of this that if I were queen of the world, I might make a few changes to. But the threshold of entry and the cost to become a real estate agent is remarkably low. Now, the education is high. You have to go through the courses and get your licensing. You have to pass state and federal exams. You have to do continuing ed. So it's not that you don't have to put effort in, but the cost of those courses, frankly, at this point, I even have a service where you could get your license for free in all 50 states for the class. Obviously you would pay the fees, right? So it's the threshold is low. And one of the things I love about that with real estate is it literally means that this pathway to financial independence and freedom is literally open to anyone and everyone. I don't care where you were born, who you are, what you've done, with a few exceptions, you have to pass security and background checks and state checks, but it is an open opportunity. And that's one thing that I would say is slightly different with your industry. As you said, the law school mortgage, it takes longer, it's way more education, and it is way more expensive. And yet,
Yeah.
when you look overall at some of the income opportunities, to a degree, they're somewhat equal. I actually study that. I analyze that data. I'm not going to nerd out and give all the data, but it's interesting to me, the two differences in that arena.
Well, I think there is a hang up though earlier in the career about I have to go to certain law school or have had
Yeah.
certain types of background in order to be successful. And I'm here to tell you, you can go to Frostburg State University, not top on anybody's
Hmm.
list. And I went to GW at night. And at the time, GW is still not, way up there, but, it's always struggled in its rankings trying to find its stride. But it's a great law school. And I got a great education. I did it at night, worked full time during the day to help sort of not have as much of a mortgage out of law school when
Right.
I
Right.
graduated. So it means something if you want to get into big law, like right out of law school, and to get one of the shishi
Hmm.
law firms and have that sort of cachet. But it doesn't really speak to your skills as a lawyer. Some of the worst lawyers I've ever met came out of Harvard, and some of the best lawyers
The
I've
best
met have
schools.
come out of
That's right.
law schools you've never heard of. Yeah. And I think
Yeah.
the difference there, we haven't talked about this component, is grit. And so,
Yes.
I'm a big believer in having grit and, having that desire to stick to and push through challenges and
Push
being
through.
able to
Yes.
try to get a problem solved. It's a big thing. And I think again, it to me, it distinguishes the successful lawyers from the less successful lawyers.
Absolutely. And you know what? I think we could, to a degree, apply that to certainly any sales position. And as I mentioned before, like any career path where your gumption and grit is going to be a big part of whether or not you're successful. That and bouncing back from losses. Certainly in
Yes.
law, man, you're in 50 roulette wheel situations a lot of the time. So you've got to be able to bounce back, be passionate, and strive for the outcome you desire, and yet bounce back quickly if it's not the one you wanted. We
Yeah.
face that as well. You gotta have grit, and you have to have tenacity, and you have to be able to dust it off, bounce up, and keep going.
Yeah. In litigation, you learn by doing. And that means you're going to do it really badly for a while. And I was always very nervous to go into court and to do that. And I spent several days in the course of a couple weeks, months, listening to other folks. And I could see people who were like great and people who were terrible and people who were just average. And I figured I could at least be average. I ended up being better than that, but it was still, it gave me the confidence of watching, even there are these practicing lawyers who are making a living being completely average lawyers. And so I don't know why, but that gave me confidence to get out there and like, I can be better than that at least. And over time, I would develop skills and it got better, but it was a pretty funny way to start.
If I had $10 for every realtor that has said to me, well, we bought a house, and let me just say that I thought if that person could be our agent and sell a house, I certainly can. That is probably the most common I became a realtor because story that I've ever heard. It's so I think that's the real estate version of what you just shared, of getting the confidence, that they're doing it, I can too. I want to jump into something that I think is kind of funny. So I feel like our two industries fascinate people, right? So like real estate has multiple cable channels where all day long it's about realtors and real estate. By the way, not remotely close to reality, right? You have how many movies about law and TV shows about law, right? How and I know that most tell me which one it is. I don't know yet of a movie that's about credit reporting and privacy attorney. So let me know which one that is, and I'll watch it. But do you ever just laugh? Do you ever laugh at like the portrayals of how things are and just think to yourself, "Oh my gosh, no, yeah."
Very, very much so. I mean, obviously, there's a lot more drama in the movies, and all that good stuff. But there's a great podcaster. If I don't mind, if I shout out someone else's podcast, but this guy
please
has
do.
the Legal Eagle. Yeah, so the Legal Eagle, he will rate movies that have sort of legal things going on them for their realism. So
Right.
it's a lot of fun. Surprisingly, like My Cousin Vinny has got a lot of accuracy to it for how things are supposed to go in court. The Rainmaker with Matt Damon, also a good one.
Okay.
Still some stuff in there that clearly is not that, but like even some of the minutia is kind of funny. And the Social Network, they actually drew a lot of the deposition scenes and stuff from actual deposition transcripts. So they actually used the words that people were testifying to during their depositions. Still a lot of dramatization around it. They compressed a lot of the stuff because in reality, getting to trial takes a long time, even in the best jurisdiction.
Long time.
A lot of work that goes into it. It's just a lot. It's too boring for television. So,
Right.
the least realistic is Boston Legal because they get a case and they go to trial the next week every single time. And it just cracks me up every time I'm watching that show.
Oh my God. Yeah, it's funny. The kind of jumping back to what you and I were talking about of people choosing a career and starting a career path. The second most common story that I hear of people choosing to get in real estate is, I really love selling sunset, so I thought I'd get into real estate. Or I don't watch the shows, so sometimes I screw up the names. I've been watching $1 Million Listing, and I know I could do that, and then I know you know enough to know they go through the headache of getting their license and getting fingerprinted and going through the checks and getting the approval. Then they join a brokerage. And then they realize that the entire process has not taught them how to sell or find clients. So then they have to learn all of that. So it usually takes somewhere around 6 months to a year where they fully accept, like, oh my gosh, it's not like it is on TV. And my industry, I had shared this with you before, out of the key industries in the US, we have the highest churn rate in the shortest period of time. So the average person that gets their real estate license with the purpose of selling real estate and making it a career, if you don't make it through that first 18 months, chances are slim to none, and none is winning, as my father used to say. Yeah, our churn rate, it hovers somewhere around 18 months if you look at it over time. At one point, if you looked at a certain period of time, it was actually 9 months, which was what I think that was the worst that it ever got. It's wonder if that also happens with law. If somebody watches Boston Legal and they're like, "Ooh, I want to, wear the beautiful suits and get a file on my desk and go to court in 2 weeks." Like, do you ever hear much of that? Or like, I watched Legally Blonde and that's going to be me. I'm going to solve the murder with the shoes. Do you have a lot of that? And then they're disillusioned. Do you think any attorneys get disillusioned?
I do think so. Although I think that usually happens the first or second year of law school because it's such hard work. And it's definitely not as easy as it looked on Legally Blonde, for sure.
Right. Right.
But then you also get into clinics and you start doing stuff and you realize, the kind of things you've got to. But I do think there is a lot more impatience in folks that are entering the market. Like they think they should be somewhere already. But there is no substitute for experience, for making those mistakes, picking yourself up, learning all of the different skills, recognizing you're not going to come out of law school with a full set of skills to do anything, just like you're not going to get your real estate license and have a book of business. It doesn't happen that way, right? You've got to build it. You've got to build your time on turf. So that's always been, I think, tougher because we are in an era where, be successful quickly through social media or doing this or doing that. This is not the field if that's what you want to do, right? If you're looking for quick success, I think you want to think about a different field because I had a great friend in law school and it was tough getting a job back then. And he was, just shy of top 10%. Smart guy, but whatever. And he ended up getting into a personal injury practice. And I'll tell you, out of all of us, he had his law school loans paid off before anyone else because he jumped in, he did real hard work. He learned from the guy who was retiring. He took over his practice. He's grown it into really nice practice now. And he got success, but it was a while, right? It still took that time. And the rest of us were still also grinding, right? Because we were doing sort of different things or finding our way. So I think having more of a long view, understanding that some of this takes time, some of it's doing stuff now that you're not going to see the benefit from for several years.
Yes.
Going out and speaking, right? I can go to speak in the same sort of group. I might not get work out of that for a year, 2 years, but they're going to remember me and then they'll come back and say, "Hey, I remember that gal. She knew something about this. I'm going to try to reach out and call her." That's what you want to have happen. I feel like real estate's another thing because it's such a relationship and a brand building exercise that if you want that $1 million listing, you might get it, but it's going to be a while. You're going to have to build your relationships up and build your brand and grow into it.
And the skills. That's one thing in both of our industries. You've got to learn the skills. And you have to learn how to present. I don't care what kind of law you're doing. Unless you legit are, and I won't say this right, you can correct me, please. But unless you're like a contract attorney that literally is just examining contracts and not interacting with people every day. You just have to do the report or like a copyright kind of thing. You've got to be able to present, you've got to be able to talk to people, and you have to be able to listen at the highest level. So the skills are so critical. And if you're willing to do all of that, which is hard work, then you can reap the benefits. Does it usually happen in 30 days? No, right?
But it's the listing you just mentioned is very important because knowing your client's problems, understanding your client's problems. So your client can email you and says, "I think I need X." that may not be what they need, right? So I've had many a client sort of email me a question and I said, well, but are you really asking this, right? Because I know the client's business. I've taken the time to learn what are things that are important to them, what are their goals, what have they been doing some new product development in. In your case, it's like dealing with the client. What is it they're looking for? What's their goal? Is it speed? Is it best price? Is it least friction in the relationship? Like
That's
only
right.
call me when it's super important? Or are they a high touch client that needs more hand holding and more reporting so that you can keep that relationship and trust going? But listening is the key component of that. Hearing what your client's saying, hearing what's behind what they're saying and trying to really understand their problems. I honestly, there aren't too many careers. I don't think that that's super important. The other component about it, you mentioned about people who are less comfortable going out and doing presentations or being, a complete extrovert. I'm not an extrovert. I'm actually an introvert by nature, but I've worked with folks who have a lot more of those skills and it's helped me develop the skills. One of my favorite stories is I worked with two partners when I was a junior attorney who gave me enormous opportunities. They were a great pair. And one of them he was that Irish personality, could tell a story to anybody, could talk anybody into anything. He just was excess of personality, not a detail guy. His best
Right.
friend and partner was the detail guy. He wrote the
Hmm.
tightest briefs. He would research the issue 8 ways to Sunday. And they were such a successful team together because they filled each other's gaps. And I think one became more gregarious and the other became more disciplined from being with each other. It was such a great relationship. We were talking about teams, I think before the call, and I was thinking about that. Like, what are the components of the teams? You're looking at different skill sets. And you don't want to hire a bunch of people that look just like you, that act just like you, that do just like
Exactly.
you. I think that's
Yes,
a huge
exactly.
mistake. Broad perspectives, different personalities, different skill sets, because I think we've all helped each other grow. And so, I've got a great team now and I rely on
Hmm.
them a lot. We have a lot of trust built up there, but part of it is because we appreciate each other's differences. So we have some very cerebral people. We have some very gregarious people. We have like deep thinkers. We have people who are amazing business folks with marketing and great new ideas, things that we haven't been thinking of and pushing us to do more. So it's a nice mix.
Right.
And I think if you're looking we're talking about trying to find the right place, trying to figure out, don't maybe not look for a place that's just like you. Maybe look for something that's going to
Exactly
challenge you
right.
or help you grow or new skills.
I'm so glad you said that because that is a trap that humans fall into when they are interviewing or if they're in the position where they're doing the hiring and it's a small business. So you don't have an HR manager that, is doing that. You're doing it. The cliche birds of a feather flock together is a reason. We tend as humans to be naturally drawn to like, oh my gosh, when you just have that immediate connection and, oh, they talk like I do and they love the same bands and we wear the same clothes. And you think that'll be the perfect person. But if they're in mini you, any place where you're weak will not be reinforced. So that the example you gave of those partners that you worked with, they were a yin and yang. So they found the skills that each of them lacked and then they combined and that makes a strong partnership. And particularly with agents that are highly social. A lot of agents have that personality style of being a high I and they are extroverts and they want someone like them for the energy. No, you don't. You want someone who wants to stay at the office, track every deal, build your database, build a 12-month marketing plan. Yeah, you need someone that is not flitting around town with you. You need someone who's going to do the things you're not good at, right? And so that
It-
leverage piece, so critical.
yeah. Well, and that goes back to that self-reflection and self-awareness, right? So what is it I need? Where am I lacking? Actually taking that time. There's another person I follow on LinkedIn recently, took a weekend and he did what he called a CEO of me retreat, which was he didn't
Nice.
do work on any legal
Hmm.
projects all weekend. It was where am I in my life? And he did holistic, like everything
Yes.
from personal to professional to etc. and spent the time. He had some books that he had used to sort of help, set his own agenda, but he spent the time with himself
hmm
all weekend looking at these issues, writing stuff down, whether it's typing or scribbling or whatever, but putting it to paper was important for him. And he came away with more clarity on like, okay, I've had these successes, but I want to be able to do more of a balance of this, or I want to expand into that. And he came out with like a really good goal setting and I think a better understanding of the things that drove him and made him happy.
It's a great idea. I'm already sitting here thinking, oh, I should do that. That sounds like a really good idea. And make it not about work, but just about your own life and your own self. Because we
That's your
lead
hope.
ourselves first
Yeah.
before anything else. So I want to put you on the spot. I'm putting myself on the spot too, by the way, because I didn't think about this when we started. What if you and I do a round robin where we go back and forth and we just give a bullet point of advice we would give either to someone who's starting a law career or starting real estate, or I don't care, for me, any sales position, or they're launching a business? What if we just went back and forth and gave little bullet points? Are you game?
All right, I'm game. I'm game.
All right. I'll start.
Well,
Since I'm surprising us, I'll start. Okay. In 2025, and I'm sure I'm not going to change this in 2026, if you are a brand new licensee, unless you are already a wildly successful salesperson in another high commission, high pressure sales industry, to get longevity in real estate, I highly recommend that you join a successful team. Even if you're driven and believe you'll have your own team one day, you will have a better chance of making it through our turn rate if you join a team. To you.
well, I'm going to marry that by find people you want to learn from and work with them. Have things to teach you, whether it's market building skills, legal skills, you name it. Find the people that are going to teach you the things that you want to learn.
Okay. I would also say, as we started this with, you must treat real estate as a business that you own and you are fully responsible for. People get into real estate saying, oh, I want freedom and I can do whatever. Yeah, you'll have freedom from money if you take that approach. It is a time where first in the office, you have to have a schedule. You have to follow your schedule. You have to talk to people every day that you work about real estate, and you have to treat it very seriously like a full-time career. If you try to go with the flow or sleep in or do whatever, you're not going to get off the ground.
Yeah. And that's actually bringing up a great point, which is particularly for newer lawyers where we have such a remote work environment these days. There aren't as many set hours as there used to be, or people say, we don't have, take whatever vacation you want, right? You need discipline. I think discipline is important. What are the things that you need to do? What are your goals for the type of work you want to get done? What are the goals that you're going to work? We're lawyers. We sell our expertise and our time. And so if you're not doing something that's demonstrating either of these, you're not making money for the business that you're working for, whether you're working for yourself or you're working for a firm. I love the way you say it. You'll find yourself free from money, which is probably a really good way to think of it. Be disciplined and figuring out how you need to do that. I think some people with the move to remote have had challenges. There was some discipline that was inherent in coming to the office. Maybe recognize that you're one of those people that really should come to the office if you can't have that discipline when it's left to your own devices.
Yes. I second that. In my industry and yours, I'm sure just slightly different language, the most successful real estate agents that have longevity in the industry are experts on the market that they service. And I'm going to put a free download in the description of this. Become the economist of choice, to quote Gary Keller, in the area you serve. You must track the market data every week for the market that you serve. So I've got a really simple spreadsheet. It takes 20 minutes. You open the MLS and you fill that in every week. So if you want to do that, it's going to make a huge difference in your entire career. You cannot get by on energy, enthusiasm, and charm. That only gets you by for so long. You must know the market inside and out.
And I think the corollary for that in a legal field, which I also think translates to real estate as well, think about how you're spending your time, right? We all have a certain amount of energy and time to spend. You're going to spend a good part of it doing the work, but always carve out that part for investing in your knowledge base, investing in your future. So I tend to think of it as if I am working X hours, I need 30% on top of that to keep on top of legal developments, to do
Right.
speaking, to do outreach, to invest on developing those presentations. So, it's not just the sitting at the desk doing the work, it's also the investment in your business and ensuring you have future work coming in. And as you said, knowing what you need to know, knowing about the market, knowing if you're in a particular area, keeping abreast of developments, reading those case law reports that we all get too busy to look at. At least be scanning through them to identify interesting developments or trends. That's one of the things I do like about going out speaking, because you've got to get yourself up to speed
Hmm.
on stuff. And sometimes that's the discipline I need. I'll schedule a sort of regular presentation. So I'm like, okay, I've got to come up to speed before I give this presentation. I got into I did for FCRA, our Fair Credit Reporting Act, work for a long time. When I came to the FTC, they had a very big program focused on data security, and that was a newer program. And I think one of the smartest things my boss did was, hey, I can't go do this presentation. So can you go speak on behalf of the agency about what we're doing in this area? Well, I learned what we were doing in that area very quickly in order to be able to speak
Yeah.
about it intelligently.
Right. I mean, that's such a great way to avoid procrastination. When you give yourself that strong deadline where you're going to be in front of people, man, you get it done. I'm going to give an old school. You and I both have mentioned a couple of old school things. So anyone who's new to real estate, back in the day, we went and we previewed properties. We previewed properties every single week. The first several years of my career, I previewed at least 10 houses a week. And so now, guess what? Today, people are like, oh, well, there's Matterport and there's virtual tours and there's the Instagram reels and the photography is so good. Anyone ever been on a dating site? Have you ever met someone in person and thought, oh, are you a messenger sent to let me know that my date can't come today? The only way you truly develop that nuanced, seasoned ability that really strong agents have of knowing immediately, is this price right for this home? Is the staging right for this home? What will cause it to sell and what will keep it from selling? What is the curb appeal? What is the nuance of the entire neighborhood? The only way to do it is to get out there and see the properties. If you are either new in real estate or your career's floundering and you want to give it a boost or relaunch, one of the fastest ways to do it is to preview at least 5 properties a week and preview properties that you want to sell. So you want to break into luxury? Preview luxury. You want to break into investor special? Preview. So, but nothing beats it. That I know it's old school. Get out there, get in the houses.
Yeah, I think that is particularly in the era of AI and AI
Yes.
assisted,
Oh yeah.
recording. Yeah, well, how things look in real life are often very different.
Very different.
AI is making its entree into the legal field. It's unfortunately become infamous more than famous, because of folks using it as a substitute for their own skills, which is not a way. It should be a tool you use to help you. So we've seen
Correct.
cases, talking about hallucinated, cases that are cited in briefs where the courts have figured out there is no such case. That isn't the holding.
Right.
The person who submitted it didn't take the time to make sure it was correct. We've had judges
It
with
was real.
opinions they've had to withdraw. Same problem, where their law clerk might have used AI and they didn't know that and found themselves with the parties pointing out. So, there is a lot of great use of technology. And I think used properly, it really can help you, give you an edge,
Yes.
help you compete with people who are much bigger than you, firms that are much bigger with you, brokerages much bigger than you. But you
Yes.
got to understand the technology and you got to use it properly. And, and I think, for example, if you were a real estate person who had put out a video or something, and then you go to actually look at the real property and it doesn't look a thing like what, yeah, like
Right.
your great dating example, which is a fabulous example.
Yes. Yeah.
I think, that erodes your credibility, just like with these lawyers who've had these
It
issues
does.
happen to them. They're going to be working long and hard to recover their reputation after that. And so I think, understanding what tools you have, but making the right use of them are really important.
Okay, final round. Let me think. What do I want to give as my final bullet point? Well, I'm just going to say this. It's hard. It's not as easy as it looks on TV. It is far more complex than many people off the street imagine that it is. It is actually hard work. I know the perception is you become a realtor and you earn six figures and it falls from the sky. No, it doesn't. However, it is very satisfying. And I'm coming up on year 27 this November. If you make it through that and you treat it like a career, one of the things that's amazing about it is always changing. So as long as you're not afraid of change, it's very dynamic. So I'm as passionate today, as I was in the beginning because you're always learning and it's changing and the people you work with or the problems you're solving change. So if you've ever had that inkling, if you are hearing this and you stayed with us this long and you ever had that inkling of what would happen if I got into real estate, I would seek out someone like me that has been in more than 20 years. Seek out someone who made it through the recession and stayed in real estate the whole time and ask them for half an hour. Honor the half an hour because believe me, the successful agents, they don't have a flexible schedule. It's a packed schedule. But ask to meet with someone, I would say, who's been in longer than 20 years and ask them anything and consider it because I would rather see you when you're 80 sitting on your front porch in a rocking chair, looking at your grandkids playing in the yard. I'd rather have you say, I'm so glad that I tried real estate, even though it didn't work out, rather than sitting there saying, what would have happened if I had tried real estate and what would my front porch look like if I did? So try it. That's going to be my final nugget in our round robin that we were doing. What is
My
yours?
final nugget
Pressure's on now.
So my final nugget for happiness over a long career is be a learner and a teacher. Take the time to learn new skills, to
Yes.
expand your base of things, learn different things, rethink things you've been thinking for years and approach problems differently. But also be a teacher. Be willing to share that knowledge with the people you work with, trying to help them grow their skill set. And I think you get so much out of that. Teach your clients, right, about what they need to know. Help educate them. I get more joy of learning new things and teaching things, and I think those are the best parts of my job.
I think that is fantastic. That definitely, I believe that is an approach that you and I have both taken just in life in general. A quick side note, another industry that is wildly successful in real estate, teachers. Any teachers out there thinking about real estate, come on over because you guys do great. Because we teach so much. Every client we're teaching them because the average has gone up to about every 10 years. So in terms of primary residence, people are only selling a house about once every 10 years unless they're an investor or, there's an extraordinary, they have 3 homes or something like that. But most average clients we're teaching extensively. So a little nugget I did not share with everyone, Becky, is you and I have known each other since we were 10. So it has been
very long time.
Such a pleasure, such a privilege to have you here. And I hope that you'll come back. I hope you will come back and be a guest again. I know there are so many things we could discuss, not just about law and real estate, but just about communication, life, overcoming challenges, all sorts of things. But I want to thank you for being our guest. And I just am thrilled to have spent this time with you. And if you're listening to us today, I hope that you'll come back as well. I hope you will come back to the next episode of The Inner Estate. Thank you so much.